With the conclusion of the war, I now wish you to prosper peacefully. From now on, all mortals are to live as one people, in harmony for common prosperity, to consider as your universal homeland with common laws wherever the excellent rule, irrespective of race. I do not divide people, as the narrow-minded do, into Greeks and barbarians. Citizens' place of origin does not interest me, nor does their race. I categorize them only with one criterion, that of virtue. In my opinion, every virtuous Greek and every virtuous foreigner is a real Greek, and every evil Greek or foreigner is a barbarian. We must not think of God as an autocratic ruler, but as the common father of us all. On my part, I consider everyone equal, white or dark-skinned. You are all one to me with God's love. Do not merely be participants in my commonwealth, but participants and partners. To the best of my ability, I will try to carry out what I pledge to you. For tonight's libation, keep this oath we have sworn as a symbol of love. Following the conquest of Gaza, Alexander led his troops towards the city of Jerusalem. The high priest Yardos was overcome by fear and concern about the behavior of the Macedonians and ordered the people to pray and beg God to save the nation. When the high priest went to sleep after the sacrifice, he heard the voice of God, who told him not to fear. Instead, the city was to be adorned with garlands, the gates were to be opened wide, and the people, dressed in white, were to welcome Alexander. When the high priest woke up, he told everyone of the prophecy, and did everything he saw in his dream. When in a region called Saphis, Alexander met the priests and the citizens dressed in white, and the high priest in his finest robe of gold-plated headdress, on which was written the name of God, he approached him alone. Needing with profound respect and humility, he embraced the high priest. The kings of Syria and all the leaders were stunned by Alexander the Great's behavior, while all the Judeans surrounded him with expressions of adoration and admiration. At some point, Parmenion dared to ask Alexander why he had knelt before those who should have knelt before him. Alexander, his face illuminated by a divine ecstasy, replied, "I did not kneel before the high priest. I knelt before God himself, in the person of his representative, the high priest, whom I had seen in my sleep, dressed just as he is now, when I was in Dion, in Macedonia." Once more, Alexander, with his profound belief in the religious ideal and in the complete knowledge that he could reach God only through magnanimity and humility, showed that the conquest of Jerusalem and any other city was an act ordained by God, who was guiding his steps at every moment of his life. Following his triumphant victories in Issos and Gorgamela against the Persians, Alexander in 331 BC entered Babylon victoriously, the great metropolis of the East. The satrap, Mazaeus, met Alexander outside the walls and handed over to him the city of Babylon. As Alexander headed his army along the procession way, the priests and the people welcomed him, offering precious gifts and strewing his path with flowers. For the Babylonians, it was the end of 200 years of Persian rule. All their temples had been pillaged by Xerxes. Once again, the voices of Olympias and Aristotle, which resounded in the depths of Alexander's soul, led him to the right decisions. Under the guidance of the priests, he made sacrifices in honor of their chief deity, Bel. He approved their requests for restoration of the temples of Babylon and gave orders to the people to repair the damage wrought by Xerxes' army. In a frenzy of joy, the Babylonians welcomed him as a liberator and as an envoy of their god. Alexander appointed the Persian Megas as political administrator and satrap. The Macedonians were surprised at their leader's choice, as they could not comprehend the magnitude of Alexander's majesty and the acuteness of his political thinking. He believed that he should honor the defeated, especially the Persians, in order to minimize the degree of their resistance to him and his army, and so they would contribute, although defeated, to the completion of his plans. In a letter to Darius, Alexander wrote, "I honor in a manner worthy of their status the Persians who distinguish themselves." And when the Persian Mithrin handed over Sardis without resistance, Alexander appointed him satrap of Armenia. Behind each such initiative, which characterized his ethos, his political and strategic thinking, and above all, his emotional moderation in every decision made by the great military commander, a modern-day researcher can detect the high standard of education acquired by Alexander next to his spiritual father Aristotle, and the practical application of these teachings in each of his decisions and actions. Alexander the Great and his conquests provided a splendid subject over the centuries for painters, sculptors, etchers, writers, and poets. In earlier years, from Raphael to Gustave Mero, they read three writers from antiquity in order to glean information about Alexander: Plutarch, Arrianus, and Quintus Curtius Rufus. Occasionally, they derive information from the historical library of Diodorus Siculiotis. Some of the monumental works of art pertaining to the life and activities of the great military commander were Alexander and Vitus by Louis Lagrange, 1787. The work depicts the Persian satrap's devotion to Alexander. Abbassiceris, at the grave of Alexander the Great, by the Greek artist Fotis Kontoglou, 1938. Alexander and Diogenes by Gaspard de Caillet in the 1620s. Alexander and Diogenes marble relief from the period 1671 to 1679, Louvre Museum. Alexander's sacrifices at the grave of Achilles by Thomas Blanchet from the period 1614 to 1689. Alexander's visit to Troy by Francesca Futabasso from the period 1707-1769. The battle at Granicus River. This wonderful work by Charles Lebrun dates back to 1661 and is in the Louvre Museum. Alexander cuts the Gordian knot, painting by Johann Georg Platzer from the period 1704-1761. The rescue of Alexander from the waters of the Cydnus, painting by Johann Georg Platzer from the period 1704 to 1761. Alexander Pan, dating the 4th century BC, on his head are two small horns, like Pan. This work is on display at the Pella Museum in Macedonia. Alexander orders the founding of Alexandria by the painter Piacido Constanzi from the period 1702 to 1759. The triumphant entry of Alexander into Babylon, a painting by Charles Lebrun in 1665 at the Louvre Museum, and the marble head of Alexander the Great dating to the 4th century BC and exhibited at the Pella Museum.
Carefully observing the superb statue,
that depicts Alexander's pan at the Pella Museum, you can see the harmonious physique of the young military commander. Without being at all excessive, it emanates vigor, strength, and inexhaustible energy. Alexander exemplified the Greek ideal of kalos kagathos. This ideal was instilled in him by his teacher Aristotle, who advocated daily exercise for the attainment of perfection in body, mind, and soul. Hamlet of